Okay, welcome everybody. The members to be discharged, Flinders, Chaffey, Playford, Waite and Torrens, replaced by the member for Hyson, Chaffey, Black, King and Newland. Welcome to today's hearing for Estimates Committee B. I respectfully acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional owners of this country throughout Australia and their connection to land and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to elders both past and present. The Estimates Committees are relatively informal and as such there is no need to stand to ask or answer questions. I understand that the Minister and the lead speaker for the opposition have agreed an approximate time for the consideration of proposed payments, which will facilitate a change of departmental advisors. Can the Minister and lead speaker for the opposition confirm that the timetable for today's proceedings previously distributed is accurate? Yes. Thank you. Changes to committee membership will be notified as they occur. Members should ensure the chair is provided with a completed request to be discharged form. If the Minister undertakes to supply information at a later date, it must be submitted to the Clerk Assistant via the Answer to Questions mailbox no later than Friday, the 5th of September 2025. I propose to allow both the Minister and the lead speaker for the opposition to make opening statements of about 10 minutes each, should they so wish. There will be a flexible approach to giving the call for asking questions. A member who is not on the committee may ask a question at the discretion of the chair. All questions are to be directed to the Minister, not the Minister's advisors. The Minister may refer questions to advisors for a response. Questions must be based on lines of expenditure in the budget papers and must be identifiable or referenced. Members unable to complete their questions during the proceedings may submit them as questions on notice for inclusion in the Assembly notice paper. I remind members that the rules of debate in the House apply in committee. Consistent with the rules of the House, photography by members from the chamber floor is not permitted while the committee is sitting. Ministers and members may not table documents before the committee. However, documents can be supplied to the chair for distribution. The incorporation of material in Hansard is permitted on the same basis as applies in the House. That is, that it is purely statistical and limited to 1 page in length. The committee examinations will be broadcast in the same manner as sittings of the House through the IPTV system within Parliament House and online via the Parliament website. I will now proceed to the following. Portfolio, Department for Child Protection. Ministers appearing, Minister for Child Protection. Estimate of payments, Department for Child Protection, 883,187,000. Administered items for the Department of Child Protection, 110,000. I declare the proposed payments open for examination. I call on the Minister to make a statement if she so wishes and to introduce her advisors.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you to the committee members for being here. I won't make an opening statement. However, I will introduce the officials that are here with me. We have Jackie Bray, the Chief Executive, Darian Shepherd-Bailey, the Deputy Chief Executive, Joanne Mull, Chief Financial Officer, and behind me, Sarah Wendt, the Director of the Social Worker Registration Scheme, Gabby Ramsey, Chief Operating Officer, and Chris Waffer, Director, Chief Executive Office.
So who's the... Okay, that's an opening statement or just questions?
I'll just go straight to questions.
Yeah.
Thanks,
okay.
Chair. If I may. Well, first question, Minister.
Before you start, I just want to indicate that it's the member for Bragg that has been discharged to be replaced by the member for Chaffey. Thank
you. Thanks, Chair. For the purposes of the reference, I'm at budget paper 4. at volume 1, child protection, program 1, which commences on page 85, and I'm over the page at page 86. There's a program summary and a table there. And I go first to the bottom of that table, the penultimate line, the net cost of providing services. And I note there that the budget for 2024-25 had allocated $793 million for the Department of Child Protection. The 2024-25 estimated result shows that an actual spend of just a bit in excess of $948 million, which is a budget blowout of $155 million. So first of all, I'll ask what the additional $155 million was spent on, and whether the Minister can explain to the committee what the budget management process looked like, and whether the Minister regards that as a failure to manage that budget. And I just flagged that I'd move on to an interest in the 2025-26 budget, having allocated $866 million for the Department of Child Protection, which is obviously $82 million less than the 24-25 actual spend. So it's not as though the budget is now providing for a new reality. The budget is providing for $82 million less for the coming year. So perhaps if the Minister might deal with first the budget blowout, and secondly how DCP might endeavour to reduce its spending by that $82 million for this year.
Thank you to the member for the question. I'll just first of all go broadly to the situation with the child protection budget since we've been in government. It's very important to reflect and to contrast the commitment that we have as a government to children, young people and their families, to contrast that to the lack of investment by the former government. Since coming to government, we have invested $674 million into the child protection budget to support children, young people and their families. Prior to this budget, that investment had sat at $570 million. This budget, there is an additional $94 million. I know that the member likes to characterise that investment, as is done this morning, as a budget blowout. We are absolutely committed to investing into helping to improve the lives of children, young people and their families. And I know that I don't get to ask questions today of the member, but no, I don't. So I'm just going to put something out there, not expecting an answer. But as I said, we've invested $674 million since coming into government, into the child protection and family support system, and $94 million this year. And those investments have very importantly gone to a range of endeavours to support the children, young people and families who most need our support, and we are really proud of that investment. Those investments go to things like, and I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to explain them at length, but they go to things which include the establishment for the first time ever of the Aboriginal peak body for children and young people, Wakwaka Nakanyini, to carer payment increases, to child abuse report line resources, to our interagency child death review model, to family group conferencing, Finding Families program, additionally approved carer program, kinship care, assessments, programs and investments that support children and young people who are in care, reunification programs, transitioning from care or post-18 programs, just to name a few. And the question that I know I can't ask here, but I think it's an important question to put on the record, we're proud of those investments. We will keep investing to support children, young people and their families. I know that the member has already characterised that as a blowout, so I'd be very interested to know at some point what the opposition would intend to cut from these incredibly important services and supports for children and young people in our state.
Thank you, Chair. I might just remind the committee of the question I put rhetorically in back in 2022, which was is more at that stage the government had exempted the Department of Child Protection from what it described as generalised operating efficiencies applied at that time, and without cavilling with that endeavour, I put the rhetorical question: is more money in child protection a sign of success or a sign of failure? That has continued, and indeed I have described repeated estimated results against budget blowing out by 100 million or more in years subsequent as budget blowouts, and I'm interested to know, and that's the reason I asked the question, what is the cause of that blowout, and in circumstances where the budget in the line item that I've taken the Minister to reduces the budget by $82 million, the question as yet unanswered is what services and programs does the Minister anticipate will be cut in order to meet that budget, or does the Minister tell the committee that once again there's no realistic prospect that the budget will be met, in which case it's a relatively meaningless exercise to set it out. I draw particular attention to the second paragraph of the explanation of significant movements that's immediately below the table, which gives us a clue. It says that the increase in expenses between 24-25 budget and 24-25 estimated result is primarily due to increased costs associated with providing services, and then we have the figure in brackets, $156 million, which I've described as the budget blowout, and I repeat that. And again, for the committee's benefit, the government provided 3 answers to that question last year, and the Minister might recall, the Minister gave one of them. The Treasurer, in answer to questions and estimates, said, well, that was due to the cost of providing services on casual, temporary, short-term kind of basis, which was at additional cost. The Premier, at or about the same time, indicated that it was a virtue of employing more staff, and the Minister gave, if I might say so, the kind of answer that the Minister's just given in general terms. And so I just invite the Minister again to indicate with some precision, if it's possible, what are those increased costs associated with providing care services, and how will they be cut, managed, trimmed, applied in order to meet the budget provision for the year ahead?
Thank you very much. I think I've got a few questions in there. First of all, in relation to what the member rightly spoke about, and that is the cruel efficiency measures that were made under the previous government. So I'll come back to that. Also...
Point of order. That's misquoting me, as I think the committee understood. The operating efficiencies that I referred to were those applied by the incoming Malinowskis Labor government in almost all agencies except Child Protection. It's straightforward, it's not controversial. And So we know that child protection was exempted from those operating efficiencies applied in that first Malinowskis Labor budget. No problem with that. It led to my rhetorical question at the first estimates that followed. Is more money for child protection a sign of success or failure? So I just need to correct the Minister in that regard.
So just to finish what I was saying, Mr Chair, I heard a range of topics in the question that the member put. One of them was about efficiency measures, and as I said, the efficiency measures that were applied relate to the last government. Also, he asked me about success and signs of success, so I'll come back to that. And also, in that question, he has spoken about the cost of providing services. So in that broad-ranging question, I will answer each of those things. And what I'll start with is the question about success. And I do that because I want to try again to get the member to understand the complexity inherent in the lives of children, young people and their families, and how what that means for the complexity of the responses and the investments that we as a government must provide. So I know the member has heard me speak about this before. Sadly, 1 in 3 children here in South Australia at some point in their lives are notified to the Child Protection and Family Support System. And children, young people and their families who are the subject of those notifications are often grappling with the most complex and deeply interconnected issues: intergenerational trauma, poverty, mental ill health, experiences of domestic, family and sexual violence, substance misuse. Those issues are really, really complex, and that adds such a degree of complexity and difficulty to the lives of the children and young people who are in those situations. So as a government who is thinking deeply and acting in a very multifaceted way to tackle that challenge for our state, we have many measures of success. And as I said, we have invested $674 million into the Child Protection and Family Support System. And in terms of the question about success, we are beginning to see promising results. We know that children, young people continue to face those circumstances, and that therefore, you know, we have a whole lot more work to do. We know that. We absolutely know that. But we are focused on reforming the system to improve the lives of children and young people. There is more to do, but we are seeing results. And one of the results that I would point to, we have, I think you asked about results and success. I'm not sure if the member had another question or...
No, I'm listening.
Sorry, I thought the other member had a question.
Blew the budget, that's the outcome.
Okay, and again, I'll just keep talking. I'm not sure what you would cut from the measures to improve the lives of children and young people, but I will continue to speak about in relation to the question from the member for Hyson, the shadow spokesperson, about those signs of success. One of those signs of success relates to the slowing of growth of children coming into care. And I have, very pleasingly, the growth rate as at the 31st of May 2025, and that sits at minus 0.6%. Minus 0.6%. That comes from a high during the last government of 9% growth of children and young people coming into care. We now sit at minus 0.6%, And similarly, we are seeing a slowing of the growth rate for children in residential care in particular. In 2021, that growth rate for children in residential care, I am advised, sat at 46.2%. That now sits, I'm advised, at -5%. So in terms of those signs of success, they are two that I would point to. I would also point to the extraordinary success that we are having through other measures that we are investing in. So obviously those measures speak to our investment in programs like Finding Families, family group conferencing, reunification. In this budget, more money for Finding Families, for our additionally approved carer program, for more staff in the child abuse report line. Other results that show that we are just beginning to see that success, and I'm always wanting to add to what we say about that success, is that of course we have more to do, of course we do, but those are promising signs. The other promising signs relate to the success rate of our family group conferencing, of our reunification programs, and I can certainly provide all of the detail about those to the member, and I'm sure I'll get the opportunity to do that during the course of this hearing. But again, in terms of his question about success, when we're seeing that difference being made in the lives of children and young people, when we're seeing our investment of $13.4 million into family group conferencing beginning to show results between 85 to 90% at particular points of time, that to me is promising. We have so much more to do. We will continue our process of reform, but I am pleased that our investments are beginning to show those signs of success. Noting again, we have more to do. The other part of the member's question was in relation to the cost of providing, I think, services, I presume particularly for children who are in care, I think was where the member was going, if I'm correct. And I wanted to speak about that. As I said, we've reduced the growth of children coming into care, which is a really important indicator. We've also reduced the growth rate for the numbers of children coming into residential care in particular. But those two things, those two figures, always have to be contemplated in relation to the complexity that I spoke about that a number of children, young people and their families are facing. Because different services need to be provided depending on what a particular child is experiencing. So different types of complex supports need to be around a particular child. So those costs do vary from child to child in terms of what we need to provide for a particular child. Some have extraordinarily complex needs. Others, as I said, there's always complexity, but those costs do vary, and they will vary literally from day to day, week to week, because different children with different needs come into contact with the system. The other point that I would make about that is that we are determined to progress reform that improves the therapeutic supports for all children living in residential care, whatever their circumstances. As I've said, there are different complexities and different types of supports that children need, but our government is embarking on a groundbreaking initiative to reimagine how residential care services can be even more responsive to the needs of children and young people who most need our support. So we intend to draw on decades of practice expertise right across the sector. We want collaborative effort to stringently focus on getting the right balance of supports and services for young people and for families and communities now and into the future. We know that the best outcome for a child, or the most desirable outcome for a child, is that they can safely stay at home with their family. Sadly, that is not always possible. When they cannot safely stay with their family, we want to try and explore opportunities across extended families and communities to have family-based care. However, there are circumstances where children and young people must live in residential care, and we are embarking on work to make sure that the best possible therapeutic supports are in place for children and young people in residential care. We want to reimagine residential care. We want to make sure that together with key stakeholders, we really look very deeply at how we can improve the supports in residential care also. In amongst those many stakeholders who need to be part of that work, very importantly, will be the voices of those who are part of the advisory groups that I've established, and in particular, the Ministerial Youth Advisory Council, made up of children and young people in care, who I want to have a voice about what the best model of residential care can look like. So there is much more to say about that particular part of the member's question, but to sum up, we won't apologise for investing in helping to improve the lives of children, young people and their families. That is a crucial thing for us to do, and I am pleased with the results that we are beginning to see, but I absolutely know that reform is really hard and we still have a way to go, but we are absolutely committed to staying the course and reforming the system to make sure we do improve the lives of children and young people. And that means that we do have to invest. And as I said, I'm not going to apologise for that. It's really important that we direct funds towards improving the lives of children and young people. I'm disappointed that the opposition describes this in the way that they do. And again, I would be interested at some point to know what particular programs they would cut, given there seems to be, and I'd be very pleased to hear otherwise, there seems to be a lack of support for the particular initiatives that we are investing in.
Thank you, Chair. I start to have some more sympathy for the Treasurer, if not for this committee, and I really do wonder whether the Minister realises why we're here. The exercise is not one of time-filling with generalised statements. We're here analysing the budget, or doing the best we can to do so according to budget lines. The Minister has presided over, yet again, a $155 million budget blowout, to the result that the government has found it necessary to apply for the year ahead an $82 million cut in the budget. Now, are South Australians watching this left to think that the Department of Child Protection's budget is just a completely meaningless exercise, and that the amount of money that is spent in child protection is just a sort of endless amount that will just continue to exceed budget in an unspecified way? What I'm really asking the Minister to do in the context of estimates is to elicit, if not a command of the budget, some indication of where those costs go. And I've directed the Minister to the budget's own explanation that talks in general terms about increased costs associated with providing care services. Now, the Minister, in that long and more or less generalised answer, has spoken about, using words that with which we're familiar from the Minister, complexity, interconnected, and then are beginning to show promising results. Is there any possibility that the Minister can enlighten the committee by reference to an unidentified case, for example, a complex one, where costs so increased unexpectedly that the Minister determined it was meritorious to blow the budget in that proportional way in order to achieve the promising result that the Minister has spoken about in generalised terms? Because otherwise, we're sort of wasting our time here just hearing from the Minister, filling time. Is there any explanation from the Minister to this Estimates Committee about where the money has gone? By reference to to one case, for example, and you have all of your advisors here.
So, again, briefly, we invest in a range of programs. This is what the member has asked. Where are we investing the money? So I'll let you know. Into family group conferencing, into post-care services, into Next Steps pilot service, into the stability post-care individual packages for those young people that leave residential care. We provide money for advocacy and support to Create Foundation, to Grand Carers SA. We provide millions, I can go through figures, money to the Stronger Start program that helps at-risk first-time parents at the earliest opportunity.
What exceeded budget?
We provide money for additional kinship care assessments, to family reunification services, to the National Redress Scheme, to the Interagency Child Death Review Model, and as I've spoken about in my last answer, to provide supports for those children in care. And
what was budgeted, what blew out?
We provide funding to support children in residential care, and of course what the member should understand is that when we're talking about that costs, of course, a number of non-government organisation partners, community organisation partners also run residential care, and I presume that that is something also that the member supports. But I've just spoken about, and I know the member's spoken about,
you see.
so as I said, children have differing complex needs which requires different types of support provided both directly by the Department for Child Protection and, as it has been the case for decades, also by our community organisation partners. And as I've also said to the member, that area, in terms of reimagining residential care, is something that we will continue to look at, because in amongst that complexity, we want children and young people to have the best possible support. We also want to make sure that we are re-looking at residential care, and alongside making sure that we are investing in all the programs I just spoke about. The member asked for programs. I've just given him information about those programs, as well as investing in those programs to keep children and young people together safely with family where that's possible.
Did that cause the blowout?
We also
What caused
have
the blowout?
to provide funding for those children in residential care. And I just want to give an example about why that question about complexity matters. And I know
That was the answer, but
you've,
not the question.
I know that
That's all right.
the member
Put a dollar figure on
has scoffed at that idea of children and young people having complex needs.
No,
but if you
Chair,
think
that's
about...
not right. That's not right. I haven't scoffed at all. What I've done
If you
is
think
I've
about,
referred to...
and I keep
Excuse me.
answering the question.
One
Is there
at
a
a
point of
time,
order?
one at a time,
Sorry,
please.
I'm still answering the question.
Chair, if I may, a point of order if necessary.
All right, what's the point of order?
Again, a mischaracterisation. What I've done, and in all sincerity, is refer to a word the Minister has used in an answer, complexity, and invited the Minister to explain how complexity, I have no difficulty with the use of that word, how that sounds in terms of a cause to budget blowout. Far from scoffing, this is serious matter, Chair, and we're here to seek some explanation by reference to the budget from a minister who ought to have command of that. And I've invited the minister, using her own words, to explain how that complexity sounds in terms of the budget. So
Yeah,
I will answer the question
But
again.
I don't appreciate the mischaracterisation.
Sure, no problem. So I'll answer the question, but again, I have to speak about complexity.
Please.
And I know
I invited you
did
to.
say something that was, you said that I repeat that word.
You do.
And I do.
You do, and I'm
because
perfectly
this
happy. Just
goes
explain it by reference to the budget.
the core of exactly what I'm talking about in terms of that provision of care services. So if you think about a child, and I can't give you particular names,
unidentified,
of course, but particular children in our care
Just one.
have such complex needs with children who are living with significant disability, very, very high-end medical needs. They may require care 24 hours a day.
So that's why you had $793 million to care for them last year.
By a team of people. So when I talk about complexity, I am talking about a range of circumstances, because as I said, every child or young person who's in contact with the Child Protection and Family Support System deals with complex issues. They absolutely do.
That's
By
why
very
you've got a budget
nature
for it.
of being in contact with the system, they are dealing with really difficult and often heartbreaking issues. And there'll
what's
be
the cause of the
different
blowout?
levels of complexity. For some children, that complexity means they may need around the clock, 24-hour-a-day care by a team of people. I was asked for an example.
But don't set up vulnerable children as somehow your bulwark for unaccountability. You've got a budget.
I was asked by you, by the member, to explain what I mean by some of those complex needs that require particular sorts of care.
Excess to budget.
I will never apologise for expending funds on the care
But how did you?
of those children
Do you even know?
with highly complex needs. I will never, ever apologise for that, and I'm surprised, frankly, that the member is questioning that. Of course we need to provide
Does the Minister
care
know how that was
for
done
those
at all?
children and young people. I am absolutely across the different needs of children and young people in care, and as I said, there are a range of needs, and we have to respond to all of them. Of course we do. Of
$3 million
we
budgeted to do so.
So we are expending our funds on providing for that care for children and young people with complex needs. Of course we are. We will keep doing that. Whichever child or young person comes into contact with the system, what their needs are must be responded to.
The Minister says the
by
Minister will keep doing so. Yeah.
By the
Yeah,
department.
Bob, maybe a little bit of advice that might smooth things over a little bit. It's the Minister does, and quite rightly, talk about complexity, and we are here to examine the budget. And I guess some of the for instance, you asked a whole set of questions, multi-barrel questions at times. It's so maybe if there was a focus on program areas, and then use the program areas to elicit some examples. So if you hone in a bit, make it a bit more specific. It's then the minister might well be in a position to respond to the specifics.
Thanks, Chair. Let me put it this way.
If I can just conclude my answer, is there a point of order?
Please.
If I can
One
just-
at a
can I
one
just
at a time,
conclude?
please.
If I
The
can
minister
just
and then
conclude
the member.
my answer. Could I please conclude my answer, just to try again to explain it to the member? Each day, a child may come into the care of the system who has highly complex needs. highly complex needs, sometimes particular conditions or a complexity of conditions or a group of conditions. So we have to pay for the care of that child. We have to
Dollars of
pay
cuts.
for the care of that child. We will continue to do that. I'm failing to understand what the member is the point that he's trying to make, because on the one hand he says there's a budget blowout and then he talks about cuts. So I'm not following his argument. What I'll say again is that
Helen?
if I can conclude my
Yeah, so like I said, if we can get back to, if we can, Minister, if we can get back to specifics, and if it could be a budget item, a line item that we can work off. It's
Penultimate line of the table
try
on
again
page
to explain
86.
it to the shadow minister.
Chair, if I might.
Order. I
$674
think
million of
I
investment
actually think we're not
into
going
the
anywhere here.
system
I think we're going
for
around in
children and young
circles.
people.
The minister's sought the reference point again. The line item relevantly remains the penultimate line of the table on page 86 that we've been at the entire time. The minister says that the minister's not understanding the question. The budget for 24-25 for child protection is $793 million.
Mr. Chair,
The estimated result, if I may, for 24-25 is $948,153,000, a blowout of the budget by $155 million, sufficient that the government has seen fit to cut the budget for the year ahead by $82 million. What are you going to cut, Minister?
That is just not true. It is absolutely not true.
Well, you've asked your question. You've asked your question. What are you going to cut?
I'll just say it
I'll
again.
give the minister can now
Thank you.
respond.
Thank you.
That's it.
$674 million of new investment into the child protection and family support system since coming to government. $94 million of new money this year. That is not a cut. Those figures are absolutely clear.
It's not responsive.
Next question.
Thank you, Chair. The minister has indicated that the minister will keep on meeting the needs, including those complex needs that the minister has referred to in such general terms. The committee, I'm sure, is interested to know, and I invite the minister to seek a reference to those advisors who are here present in the committee to the extent that it may be necessary. What command has the minister got? Indeed, to what extent is the minister satisfied that those needs will be met in the face of the $82 million reduction that is on the face of the budget paper, set out in the relevant line item, from the estimated result in 24-25 to the budget in 2026. How are you going to do that? Or are you just not going to attempt it?
We have $94 million of new investment into the budget this year. $94 million of new investment.
17. We can all look at that. Shall we go there? That's the budget measures. Budget paper 5. I hope the minister's got that readily to hand. Budget paper 5 at page 17. We've got budget measures described as additional resources for out-of-home care. You see that? There's only one table on the page, one line item. Operating expenses for out-of-home care, additional resources. This is a so-called initiative to provide $85 million over 4 years from 24-25 to support children and young people in care. I say so-called because those expense amounts, including $61.4 million in the 25-26 budget, the second number from the left, to be compared and contrasted with the $82 million budget cut from the estimated result in 25 to the budget in 25-26. 26. So how does the Minister explain the additional resources except by some sort of Orwellian reference of comparison between budget 24-25 and budget 25-26, given that the estimated result that the Minister hasn't challenged at any point for 24-25 is in fact $948 million. So,
Mr Chair, kids need 24-hour care.
oh, here we go.
That costs money.
So the budget's meaningless for child protection, is that right?
Kids need 24-hour care. That costs money. We've invested significant funds since coming to government, $674 million of new investment and $94 million this financial year. And the really important thing for the member to understand is that as well as providing care and being able to respond to those children and young people who come to us with really complex needs, we are also expending money on programs like family group conferencing, the additionally approved carer program, which has more money in this budget, the Finding Families program, the reunification programs, so that we can also work, whilst we're working, to provide care for those children and young people who cannot safely live with their families. We also need to invest in those other services that strengthen families, hence our investments in family group conferencing, reunification, Finding Families, the additionally approved carer program. We will continue to do that. We will continue to invest in both of those, in all of those sorts of programs, and in providing funds to care for children who cannot safely live with their family. We will continue to do that. It is the right thing to do.
Page 17, and maybe I should stress that after 3 years, none of this is trick question. None of this is a gotcha moment. It's an opportunity to provide some precision around where the money's going. There's been blowout, excess to budget repeatedly. If the Minister had command of the budget and the department, might care to tell the committee where it's gone, why it's exceeded budget, and there's an opportunity to do so in the table at page 17 of Budget Paper 5 in the budget measures. I'm somewhat sceptical of the characterisation of the budget measures additional resources. I've flagged that. Is the Minister able to, again, enlighten the committee to any extent as to where those specific amounts in 25-26, 61,408,000, and 26-27, 4,544,000, and then in 27-28, an estimate of 554,000. What are those very precise amounts of money going to be applied to? Why are they to be spent in that way over that time? And how are they not just to be read as some papering over of this excessive budget expenditure in the department more broadly?
So again, Mr Chair, as the member has pointed out on the page 17 of Budget Paper 5, we will continue to invest in caring as it sets out on that page very clearly. We will continue to provide care for children and young people. Of course we will. Of course we will. I am interested to know whether that is something the member would back away from. Of course we need to provide funds to care for children and young people, some of the most vulnerable children and young people in our state. I'm appalled that the member is backing away from providing those funds for children and young people in care. It is absolutely appalling.
Apart from being completely inappropriate, the minister is seeking to apply some outcome of what the opposition might do, completely without any
order?
reference.
What is the point of order?
I take exception again to the mischaracterisation. The minister should answer the question about what the government's doing by reference to the line item.
It's not a point of order.
Yeah, and I think we do need to move on. It's so we can keep going around in circles, which is what we appear to be doing.
Could I please finish my answer? Yeah. There is not a point of order.
Wait, please.
Just because you don't like what I'm saying, that's not a point of order.
Answers the questions by reference to the line items,
Yes,
just as the questioner is required to stick to the line items.
If I can please answer the question. $85 million, as he's spoken about right there, will continue to be provided. The funding that is needed will continue to be provided for children and young people in care. That is exactly what we should do. I'm not sure why there's this scoffing and laughing about providing care for children and young people who have complex needs. Also,
Andy, let the minister finish, please.
Also, 2 other points. I've listed at length all of the other programs that we're investing in. I've done that twice now. I can do it again. I'm not sure why the member isn't hearing that. I've already answered the question. Also, we know...
Can we let the minister finish and then you'll get your turn?
We know that residential care is expensive. We know that. And that is why I also just spoke about a process of reimagining residential care in partnership with our stakeholders, bearing in mind that it is both DCP and community organisations who provide those residential care services. I've spoken about the work that we are doing to make sure that it is the best it can be and that children and young people's voices will be heard in that process. We are very clear. We will keep investing to support children and young people who live away from their families. Away from their families. Of course we will. I'm appalled that there is this commentary about the government rightly providing those services. Alongside that, we will continue to invest in all of those other programs to strengthen families, to reunify children where it's safe to do so, to convene family group conferences to support Wakwakana Kanyini in its efforts as a peak body for Aboriginal children and young people. I am absolutely appalled by this commentary from these 2 who don't seem to support any of those measures. Again, they need to be clear about what is the point of order? Cut from these.
I take exception to reflections on some members of the committee.
The
it's
member
entirely
next to you
erroneous.
is hurling insults.
Excuse me?
You heard him just as well as I did. You heard him just as well as I did.
He said it's
outraged
The member for Chafee, can you please stop?
Well, maybe ask him. Ask him.
Member for Chafee.
Chair, staying with the table, Minister, if the budget process is as I understand it, am I right in this proposition? There's an initiative that provides $85.1 million over 4 years from 24-25 to support children and young people in care. Did the minister make a representation to the Treasurer and or the Cabinet seeking this amount of money? And if so, for what purpose? And I'll invite or flag that my subsequent question will be, can the minister provide any explanation to this Estimates Committee as to the application of that money in each of the years that are set out in the table that the government has provided for the purposes of these estimates?
I've answered this question. We provide those funds for children living in residential care, and of course, all of our Cabinet colleagues discuss budgetary matters.
What the committee's left, Chair, what the committee is left to conclude, yes, that it's a question. The committee's left to conclude that this is nothing more than a reprofiling, that the minister's not taking ownership for in respect of this amount, and that there is no explanation for what support children and young people in care can expect to receive in respect of the $61,408,000 in 25-26, the much diminished $4.544 million in 26-27, and then this rather specific, relatively minor sum of $554,000 in 27-28. Is there any explanation to the committee as to what this means, why it's provided in each year, what it might be provided for, beyond the kind of generalised statements without reference to money that the minister has so far provided over the better part of an hour to this committee?
So, as I've said before, those funds go to both community organisation partners who deliver residential care, and also DCP directly delivers residential care. So I've been very clear that funds go to both DCP's provision of residential care and our community organisation partners to deliver residential care. Each time that a child or young person comes to the attention of the system and we go through the processes and then it is determined that the safest option for that child is to live in residential care, we then assess what is happening for that child and determine the sort of care that particular child needs. It is right that is continuously assessed and that decisions are made about the sort of package of support that each child or young person needs. Alongside that effort and that investment into residential care services, we also invest in a range of programs to strengthen families and we invest in services to support carers who provide care for children in family-based care. So, for instance, on that note, we have increased carer payments, the 22-23 by 4.8% plus additional $50 a fortnight, then 2.5%, then 2.5% this year also. We've introduced our flexible respite payment for carers that was introduced at the beginning of last year. So we invest in those programs also.
No, Chair, I'll move on. Perhaps to slightly change the topic, but bring us back to the point about FTEs that was the subject of multiple answers by government last year. And I recall that I asked the minister last year, was she aware of the Treasurer's response in estimates the day before, and the minister was aware, and there was some focus at this time last year on the point about FTEs contributing to costs in the DCP budget. If by reference to Budget Paper 4 Volume 1 at page 86, we're still in that table and we move from the penultimate line to the final line of that table, we've got FTEs as at June 30, and the budget 24-25 provided for 2,551 FTEs. You see that, Minister? And so that's where I am. We see that, Chair? Yep. And the estimated result for 24-25 was 2,582.7 FTEs. So there's a difference, I think, of 31, if my math's right. So there's 31 additional FTEs than were budgeted for. what roles are those additional 31 FTEs performing, and what's the breakdown of the additional cost to budget for those additional 31 FTEs?
Two things, Mr Chair, just to finish on an earlier point about the members' previous sets of questions. The other thing to be very clear about in terms of the investment into residential care and why that changes is because, as well as responding to complexity, as I said right at the beginning of this hearing, but the member doesn't seem to want to hear it, we are reducing the rate.
What's the point of order?
growth.
I
We
take
are
exception to the reflection on a member of the committee. It's contrary to standing orders.
And
I
Ask your
do
friend
want to
next
hear
to
it.
you.
I don't think it's.
questions.
I actually don't think it's needed, and I don't think it's helpful.
No, and I also don't think it's helpful,
Yep.
the slander that I've been subjected to by the member.
Now, can you
Chafing.
wrap up the summary for what is a previous
I don't.
question?
It's not okay.
And
Not
this
okay.
question is a very specific
And I'll
one.
call it
so
out
it's-
every time. I will call out that behaviour
Yep.
every time. And I suggest that the member for Hyson, why don't you call out that behaviour? Call it out. I'll go back to what I was saying, Mr Chair. So the other thing, in relation to the costs of residential care, that is really, really important to note, and I said it right at the beginning, is that we are slowing the growth of children in care. So that also has an impact on the funds expended in residential care. I'll get to the next part of the question. So the really important thing to note, Mr Chair, is that since coming to government, we have grown the number of staff, of FTEs. The
Okay, so
FTE
we're getting
growth
to the
has
specific
been
question now. Okay.
241. Since coming to government, 241 increase in net FTE. That's really, really good news. That is really good news. I'm sure the member is very pleased to hear that. And we are also very, very pleased that just recently we have had a record number of frontline youth workers recruited to provide care and support and empowerment to those children and young people. So I'm very, very pleased by the overall result, and I'm very pleased about that growth in those youth workers at the front line. The other staffing measure,
I think the Minister is attempting to answer the question in that there's a reference to youth workers.
I'm answering it. I'm actually answering it.
Yeah.
Then the other point that the member can see in the budget in relation to staffing is that we've invested $2 million additional into this budget to increase the numbers of staff in the child abuse report line. And can I say on this point, both in relation to youth workers, to those contact centre staff, and indeed to all of the staff in the Department for Child Protection, and indeed right across the system, can I say to them, thank you for the incredible work that they do to provide support to children and young people. Their commitment is absolutely extraordinary. They are the people who have to make those very difficult decisions about whether or not to remove children, and that their work and their commitment to those children is extraordinary. I'm very pleased again, 241 new staff, new FTEs since coming to government, increase in youth workers, increase in this budget in the child abuse report line staff.
Thanks, Chair. What we've learned so far in relation to these additional 31 FTEs is if I might say so, very little indeed. I asked the Minister again, what roles are these 31 additional FTEs performing? Now, put it in the context of a business, in the real world. You employ 31 FTEs, you employ one FTE, you want to know what they're doing. You employ 31 FTEs, it's a significant business all on its own. Surely the Minister has taken some interest in what those FTEs are doing and is aware of the fact that there are 31 excess to budget. And I don't know what goes on. Apparently there's not a particular budget request for a particular outcome. In the same way, in terms of these 31 FTEs, is that just drift through the course of the year that the Minister's become aware of on reading the budget papers? Is there some explanation? It might be a good one.
For goodness
And if so,
sake.
what are they doing?
For goodness sake.
The Minister did indicate in the broad the child abuse line and another additional service that has had the benefit of more FTEs. Now,
I'd love to know how many.
I think you want something more specific than that, and it might well
Other
be
positions,
if the
other
information
positions.
is not available
Yeah,
at the
of
moment,
course it's
then it could be
available.
reported back.
I don't need,
Yeah,
no,
so-
of course, I don't need to take any questions on notice. I'm well across
Okay.
all of the budget, of course. So those positions also include case managers and support staff who, again, do extraordinary work supporting children and young people.
How many case managers were employed in addition to budget, and when did they commence? Who made the decision and for what purpose?
So we're talking about the budget for 1st of July going forward.
No, we're not. We're talking about the budget
and
papers at the line of FTEs at page
again,
86.
I will break it down for the member. We've employed 241 net additional FTEs since coming to government, in sharp contrast to those opposite. We are growing staff numbers to support children and young people. That is the right thing to do. I'm not sure what's funny about that. That's the right thing to do. And I've already answered the question about case managers, support staff, and we will continue to grow staff in that 241 FTEs from April to April this year, so April 24 to April 25. Just in that period, another 79.5 FTE. So whichever set of questions the member chooses to give a speech about and ask some questions on, I have those figures. I've just answered the question. I will leave it there.
I'm not going to leave it there.
No, can I just once again intervene? It's
We're here analysing the budget.
The Minister has, in part, answered the question, and I guess the member is actually seeking specifics. And that's why, if it's not available now about what the breakdown is, it can be provided.
I've just provided it.
Well, I appreciate that, Chair, and that's on the record as well, and it's there for all to see. The Minister has nothing more to say about the matter, apparently. I invite the Minister to take on notice the particulars of what roles these 31 additional FTEs are for those 31 FTEs is. The Minister wishes to decline. The Minister might reflect on that in the remaining 20 minutes.
I haven't declined. I've
And
answered the question very, very clearly.
All right.
I've just spoken about April to April, 79.5 FTE higher, so April 24 to April 25. I've described a range of the positions that we are growing.
Thanks, Chair. The program summary income expenses table, same page.
Same page, yeah.
Same table. The 25-26 budget provides for 2,595.8 FTEs. nearly 2,596 FTEs. That's an increase of 13 or so for this financial year ahead. How many of those FTEs are allocated to the CAL as per I think there's been a government budget announcement about that. And what are the remaining FTEs for? There's apparently no reduction in FTEs to contribute to the $82 million reduction in expenditure that's budgeted for this year ahead. Is it correct to say that there'll be no reduction in FTEs to meet that $82 million budget reduction for the year ahead?
As I said, we're growing FTEs. To go to the first part of the question about the 13, the member will see in the budget papers that one of our many new investments relates to new staff in the call centre and also in the additionally approved carers and finding families program.
What are the remaining FTEs for, I think was my next question.
So I've spoken about the various positions across the Department for Child Protection. I've just spoken about the 13, the call centre and the additionally approved carers and finding families program. And I've also spoken about the sorts of positions that we have been growing in the Department for Child Protection. Youth workers, case managers, amongst others.
Thanks, Chair. So what we've learned so far, I suppose, is that the number of FTEs from this year with an estimated result of 2,582.7 to the year ahead 2,595.8 is approximately 13 FTE increase over and above the FTE increase the year before. And against that, we see this quite substantial $82 million reduction in the budget. So there's an additional, one might presume, but if that's not right, if somehow these FTEs are employed at a reduced cost to current FTEs, that might be one explanation. But there's a relatively significant increase in FTEs and therefore, I presume, cost. And at the same time, there is an $82 million cut to the budget as against the estimated result from this year. Did the Minister protest that result to the government? Does the Minister have any reasonable expectation of meeting the budget, presumably not contributed to by FTE neutrality or cut? And if so, what will be the contributors to achieving that $82 million budget reduction for the year ahead?
So first of all, to be very, very clear, we are not cutting any staff, any FTEs, absolutely not. We are not cutting any staff. We will continue to make reforms to the system, reforms that are finally seeing a reduction in growth in the number of children and young people coming into care. That is a really important factor in terms of assessing the cost of providing services to children in care, the slowing of the growth of numbers of children and young people coming into care. Our work on programs like family group conferencing, reunification, finding families are all showing results and adding to that result. It's a result that I am very, very pleased about. That reform will continue. We will continue with our investments in programs that help to keep families safely together, and we will also, as I've spoken about, continue our work to reimagine residential care, and we will continue, whatever complexity, whatever needs a child comes to our system with, when they require care, we will meet the costs of that care.
Thanks, Chair. Turning to page 87 of same paper, same volume, agency statements, budget paper 4, volume 1, page 87, it's the table immediately opposite performance indicators, and the first line of the performance indicators table is a new indicator, as is indicated there, as is set out by the words new indicator. It's the first of them that says percentage of investigations completed within 90 days from notification bracket response time. Now that's a new indicator. Previous budgets, including the 24-25 budget, had a similar line item appearing as the first line item. That no longer exists, however, here. That line item was an indicator being the percentage of investigations commenced within 7 days from notification, brackets, response time. So there are two response time indicators, and if I might, the committee will be well aware of that context, I expect, but that was an indicator that was repeatedly and dramatically falling short of target. So just from memory, the estimated result against the 75% target was in the 50s each time. It was sort of nowhere near being achieved. And then we see on the application of this new indicator, completed within 90 days, we see the sort of relatively, rather more rosy looking figures by reference to target, including retrospectively. It's not a criticism. I see it is true. The estimated result exceeds the target, which I think is something the government would like to
Calling you out on
to see. The previous indicator was a 7-day commencement target, and that was not achieved by wide margin. So I'm interested to know why the government has seen fit to do away with that previous indicator as to response time, which had repeatedly failed to meet its target, and instead substitute one which I might say members of the committee might regard as being rather less of a call it exacting measure of how the department is going about discharging its obligations. What policy reason might justify that change, and what indeed can the Minister say about the good old response time indicator being commenced within 7 days?
So I explained this to the member last year about the way that the national bodies assess rate of investigations, and we actually have an investigation turnaround period that is not measured nationally, and that is a 24-hour investigation rate. So that is the difference, which isn't something that is assessed nationally. What you'll be really, really pleased to know is that the most recent ROGS data actually placed South Australia as having the second highest result of all Australian jurisdictions in terms of the rate at which investigations are undertaken. And really importantly, this is a really important figure for you to understand. Again, the ROGS data shows that South Australia's rate of investigations and successful completion of those investigations sits at 15.1 points higher than the national average. That's really, really good news. The other really good news about investigations is that at the time of Nyland, the rate of cases that were not proceeding at that time sat at 55%. 55%. And up until us coming to government, those figures remained worrying. The rate of investigations now, and again, we're 15.1% higher than the national average, now sits on that same figure about the not proceeding at a rate, we've reduced that by almost 40%.
Thanks, Minister. And Chair, all of which begs the question, and I might say it's been interesting to hear that the Minister's fluency with respect to this particular data and willingness to address specifics stands in stark contrast to an unwillingness to address specifics in relation
Mr. Chair,
to the budget as a whole. The question that begs, Minister, is why should South Australians, let alone this committee, not form a view that this change of indicator is just straightforward cherry picking to put a gloss on departmental performance?
I've just explained this particular matter to the member, and again, I would refer the member to the ROGS data, which shows that South Australia's investigation rate sits at 15.1 percentage points higher than the national average. That, Mr. Chair, is good news.
That's the figure, and what's the national average?
So that, Mr. Chair, is really good news. So we had an increase of notifications last financial year, or the 23-24, had a 17.5% increase on the number of notifications compared to 22-23. And again, we are 15.1 percentage points higher than the national average. And I'd refer you to the ROGS data to look further at that really pleasing result for South Australia.
Not sure what question the Minister was answering there, Chair. I'll just ask it again. What is the national figure and what is the South Australian figure that exceeded that by, as the Minister said, by 15%?
I'm happy to provide the ROGS data to the member.
Can the Minister just put on the record now? It's apparently in front of the Minister now.
I'm happy to provide the ROGS data to the member, so I'll take that on notice and provide the ROGS data in full to the member.
I'm sure it's interesting for the whole committee. Is the Minister able to just indicate to the committee then what percentage of investigations were commenced within 7 days from notification over that relevant period?
So again, I can provide all of that data, the ROGS data, to the member.
And is the Minister...
I will provide that. I'm not quite sure how else to say that.
Data will be provided, so you'll get your answer.
And is the Minister willing to, in doing so, just notate it to whatever extent the Minister wishes to point to the figure that the Minister would rely upon?
Very happy to do that. I'm very happy to do that. That's the answer to that question.
In order to substantiate that response.
Very happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
And otherwise, I note that the Minister declines to answer for the committee here today what the percentage of investigations commenced within 7 days from notification happens to be. I don't know what the reason for that might be.
So again, I did explain this before. This is not the case in every jurisdiction, nor how every jurisdiction measures. It's not the case that every jurisdiction measures in this way, but we actually measure commencement within 24 hours, which again, I'm sure the member will be pleased about.
Next question.
Thanks, Chair. And I want to move to a topic that I think the Minister will welcome just in the 5 minutes remaining. But I do, for the benefit of the committee, if not for me, and sometimes I'm a bit slow, am I to be reminded that the data that the government previously placed at this point in the table in relation to investigations commenced within 7 days was in fact a figure that indicated investigations actually commenced within 24 hours. Is that what the Minister is indicating to the committee?
Two measures here in South Australia, 24 hours and 10 days. And you will see from the provision of the ROGS data, our performance in relation to investigations surpasses other jurisdictions. And I presume that the member would be very happy to hear that. I also would point the member to the fact that we are recruiting additional staff, investing in additional staff into our child abuse report line, which again will help with that receipt of information. The other thing to point the member to, which again I'm sure he's very happy about, is I've been very clear in previous discussions in the Parliament about the child protection share of the digital investment fund. And what is very pleasing in this budget is that we have just the first tranche of that funding of $14.9 million for KidSafe Connect. And KidSafe Connect is the system that over time will replace the C3MS system. And what is really important about that replacement is that that will enhance, make much more efficient and effective how information about children and young people who are the subject of a notification to the Child Protection and Family Support System is received, how it's analysed, and I very much look forward to that investment, again, that investment through this budget delivering for children and young people, and indeed enabling those remarkable workers at the front line to continue with their work and indeed to enhance their work.
The next question is at page 88 of Budget Paper 4, Volume 1, just over the page. It's the activity indicators table, and I just, in the 2 or 3 minutes remaining, refer to the fourth line of that table, the number of children and young people under the guardianship of the Chief Executive for a period of up to 12 months. The 24-25 budget projected that number would grow to 650, and as the Minister has indicated earlier, in terms of a slowing of growth, the 24-25 estimate is 560, which is a significant variance, and the 25-26 projection is an increase to 580, still somewhat significant variance to the 24-25 projection. Is there any explanation as to why there is such a significant variance, albeit in circumstances of the continued growth of the number of children and young people under the guardianship of the Chief Executive for that period?
So, as I said, we have reduced the rate of growth of children and young people in care, which is incredibly pleasing. There are a range of measures that I would attribute that to. Some of them go to the success, incredible success through our investment into family group conferencing, into finding families, and also into the reunification programs that we have invested in. So I'm very pleased with the results that they are showing. Right now, I can let the member know that as at 31st of May, that growth rate is now minus 0.6%. So I'm sure the member is also pleased with that rate. Also, the thing to understand about family group conferencing is that one of the things that happens both in family group conferencing and in reunification processes is that with that figure there about for a period of up to 12 months, those programs are successfully intervening so that when a child or young person is taken into care through the intervention of one of those programs, it is less likely that they will stay in care for a longer period, but rather that they will go back to safely live with their families within that 12-month period, and hence why we measure that in the way that we do to think about what interventions can be successful in that 12-month period. And again, that decrease relates to the success of those programs that we are investing in. What I can tell you is that I'm advised that around, pardon?
Can you wind up?
Oh, sure. I'm advised that last year, in that period, I'm advised that around 500 children returned home in that period, and that's certainly work that we will continue.
Thank you. The allotted time having expired, I declare the examination of the proposed payments for the Department of Child Protection and its administered items complete. The member for King.
Sitting of the committee be suspended until 10:45 a.m.
I put the question. Adjourn to 10:45 a.m. Thank you.